Well, picking up on our discussion last hour of Susan Rice and the story that broke by Eli Lake over at Bloomberg about former National Security Advisor Susan Rice requesting the identities of U.S. persons in raw intelligence reports on dozens of occasions that connect to the Donald Trump transition and campaign and that had nothing to do with the FBI investigation into ties between Russia and the Trump campaign. Unmasking. It certainly smacks of using the apparatus of the state to surveil political opponents for the purpose of politics, not national security. Charles Krauthammer weighing in on this yesterday.
Clearly, there was some improprieties in the gathering of information about the Trump people. There probably was a felony committed in the leaking of the information about General Flynn. The story today about Susan Rice is, well, if she did order, or if she did allow herself to go in and then to unmask all these people, the question is this: was it in pursuit of national security interests, in which case it's proper, or was it not, in which case it's improper, possibly illegal?
So,
and that's what I want to know. Was it illegal?
Well,
was she within her right to do this?
Well, this is why more questions need to be asked, and those questions need to be answered by Susan Rice. Jim Sciutto, CNN, trying to do the bidding of the Obama regime, and Miss Rice reporting yesterday that he spoke to someone close to Rice,
her friends,
on these allegations, and reported, quote, "The idea that Ambassador Rice improperly sought the identities of Americans is false. There's nothing unusual about making these requests when serving as a senior national security official, whether Democrat or Republican, except according to Eli Lake's reporting and also sources the Wall Street Journal references, unnamed, admittedly, there is something very unusual about what's happening here." For more on this, we're pleased to be joined again by our friend and former United States Attorney General Alberto Gonzales, who now is the Dean of the Belmont University School of Law down in Tennessee. General Gonzales, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
So what is your spidey sense telling you about the report from Eli Lake and the associated questions that it raises?
I don't know if I should be relying upon my spidey sense. Listen, I think it's interesting. There is so much we don't know, however. I mean, there may be perfectly legitimate reasons, as Mr. Krauthammer indicated in his reporting. There may be perfectly legitimate reasons for Susan Rice, who is an National advisor. She's reading these intel reports to want to know why someone in Russia is communicating with someone and mentioning an American's name and wanting to know what's going on here. That is her job. Is to know how Russia, for example, is going to be responding to sanctions by the Obama administration. So there may be perfectly legitimate reasons why, as an National advisor, she would want those names unmasked. Now, of course, what happens after that, I think it raises a much more serious question. Were those names then leaked to the press? Were they disseminated in a way that was improper? So there's still a lot of information that we just simply don't know. But it's certainly true that everything here may be perfectly okay, but yet again, we don't know what the motivation was behind the request by Susan Rice, if in fact she made the request. And by the way, there are laws that are in place. You can't simply say, I want this information unmasked, and there not be a record of it. There should be a record of it somewhere. And so hopefully we'll get to the bottom of what actually happened here.
Now, give us some insight into how this would work, because if you've got her making these requests, at the same time you have an FBI investigation into the Trump campaign and questions about ties to Russia and all of this, Russian collusion. Would there be information sharing, or would they be operating? Would NSA be operating in a silo vis-a-vis the FBI?
Yeah, totally separate. It would be totally separate. Susan Rice, let's assume that the motivation is the appropriate one here, that she simply is doing her job as an national advisor. She is requesting this information in the normal course of business. This happens all the time. And separate from that is the FBI doing its investigation about possible Russian influence, possible collusion with the Trump administration. Again, no evidence of that, but yes, those would be operating on totally separate tracks.
So if you are unmasking somebody, what's the process like? What do you have to file any paperwork? Do you have to let other people know that you're unmasking somebody?
Yeah, you have to get permission to do that, and there are a certain limited number of people that can grant that permission, and then that when that happens, that is logged into a registry. So again, very careful records are supposed to be kept of this kind of activity, and it, I don't want to say it's routine. It happens, yes. I guess it is proper to say it's somewhat routine, because in order to do your job, you sometimes need to have that kind of information. But because it's important that you don't want to publicize something that may impact someone's reputation, there are limits in terms of what you can do with that information once you get it. And when someone makes a request to unmask and that request is granted, that there is a registry that keeps a record of all that. So again, it's all supposed to be detailed. Everyone's supposed to understand what the rules are in place in order to prevent something like, something political from happening, or using this information for personal gain or political gain. So, again, so much we don't know here about the motivation and exactly what happened, who asked for what, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, and this is why the questioning when both Comey and Mike Rogers were before the House Intel Committee, they were the question on this topic of, well, how many people have the authority to pursue unmasking, because they were trying to get to this matter of the leaking of Flynn's name. What's the universe we're talking about people who would be able to authorize the unmasking or gain authorization, would have access to that information, so you can kind of try and zero in on who the potential suspects are. And so it seems to me that at minimum, Susan Rice is a suspect with respect to the leaking of General Flynn's name, the one crime that we know has been committed.
Well, she would certainly have again, think about it, she's an national advisor. And so you would certainly expect that someone like in her position would have the authority to request that a name be unmasked so that she can do her job. Hopefully that's the motivation for what may have happened here, to the extent that it was Susan Rice that asked that these names be unmasked. Again, I can't confirm that. That's just what the reporting is saying.
But is there a possibility she might have taken it one step further and leaked the information? And that is
no
a crime.
question about yes, that would be illegal, and that would be totally inappropriate. And of course, she may have shared that information with someone that as part of her job, and that person may have leaked the information. That also would be unlawful. So yes, we just there's so much here that we just don't know.
I want to switch gears. I got to get you, as a former United States Attorney General, to weigh in on the nomination of Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court. That's going to be taken up. It's being taken up this week. Senate Majority Leader McConnell saying they will vote on Friday, and they will confirm him, and they will apparently have to exercise the nuclear option because Democrats have the votes to filibuster. And the quality of the arguments that opponents of Gorsuch are making. Most interestingly, it seems that they've gone from the seat was stolen from Merrick Garland to it traditionally requires 60 votes. And now they're following an argument that's been laid out by Lawrence Tribe of sorts. Lawrence Tribe, of course, the liberal Harvard law professor, who has described Gorsuch as such. Gorsuch is a brilliant, terrific guy who would do the court's work with distinction. That's Larry Tribe on Gorsuch. And then Tribe says, hold the phone. As more emerges regarding Donald Trump's theft of the presidency, it gets clearer that we mustn't keep calling him POTUS. He's a usurper. So now the argument is because Donald Trump is not a legitimate president, Neil Gorsuch can therefore, by some kind of transitive property, not be a legitimate nominee for the Supreme Court. What's your take on all the swirl around Gorsuch?
Well, that's just ridiculous, first of all, and it certainly would not be consistent with the constitutional framework envisioned by our framers. Listen, President Trump was elected by the people. He made a nomination. That nomination is pending before the Senate, and if Senator McConnell and Senator Grassley to be believed, Neil Gorsuch will be confirmed to the United States Supreme Court this week. And irrespective of how you may feel about the president, I happen to know Neil. He worked for me when I was the Attorney General. He's a wonderful individual, extremely bright, extremely talented, and I think he'll do a great job on the Supreme Court. And, it's really a shame that it's come to this. I am on record in saying that I think that Merrick Garland was treated unfairly, and that the Senate, the Republicans should have given him a vote, at least a hearing. And if they didn't like it, if they were afraid about, if they wanted to keep that seat open for the next president, they could have voted him down. But they didn't do that. But we're past that now, and so we have a vacancy that's been there for a year. We need to fill it on behalf of the American people. And I think we've got a nominee here who's qualified and should be confirmed by the Senate this week.
And someone who respects and knows Neil Gorsuch, is it hard for you to watch Democrats try it? I mean, they're trying so hard to find something bad about him, but he's a reputable man, a reputable judge. And are you upset that it's come to this?
Well, listen, this is part of the process, and this has been this way for some time in terms of this is a lifetime appointment. It's a very important appointment. There should be extreme due diligence paid with respect to any nominee to the U.S. Supreme Court. But some of the things that have been said about Neil Gorsuch just are fundamentally untrue. And like many things in Washington, I think this process has become politicized, and that's very, very unfortunate because this is a very good man, and I know he'll do a tremendous job on the court.
As somebody who went through a Senate confirmation proceeding yourself and in the legal arena, so where senators do what they always do is try and figure out, what your philosophy on the law is, how you view controversial cases and the Supreme Court's jurisprudence, and
if you finished your first grade homework.
Yes, right. That's the full proctological exam. But what is your take on what the confirmation hearings have become? Kind of these show trials with the opportunity for senators to pontificate for a few minutes to check a box, and then you get to the kind of raw vote counting and political maneuvering that you could have done without anybody ever asking anybody a question.
Well, it's interesting. Gorsuch testified that his boss, Byron White, his confirmation hearing lasted 90 minutes.
Right.
And he smoked the entire time during the hearing. So things have changed. And it may be part of the reason it's changed is because now there is so much more at stake. I think people look at Congress and the ineptitude and the gridlock that occurs in Congress, and that so little is done, and people are frustrated. And so they look to the courts to maybe get things done, a place where policy can be made. And I think perhaps that's one of the reasons why this has become the new battleground in terms of how you shape policy, how you drive policy. And, of course, that's not what the framers intended. The courts are not there to develop policy or to shape policy. They're there to simply interpret the laws passed by Congress and to interpret the Constitution. But I think part of the reason why this has become so politicized is because this is sort of the new battleground of where policy is going to be driven forward.
He is Alberto Gonzales, former United States Attorney General, now the Dean of the Belmont University School of Law. General Gonzales, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.